Hello and welcome back to the Biochemistry for Health Sciences channel. Today's video is about the effects of insulin on the human body. In the last video, we saw how high glucose levels that we see after a meal causes the beta cells of the pancreas to secrete insulin via the triggering pathway as well as the amplifying pathway. Once insulin is in the bloodstream, it will go to every part of the body. So let's see what are the effects of insulin on the body. So after a meal, a carbohydrate-rich meal, a regular meal, the carbohydrates will be digested in your GI system. That's going to release a lot of glucose. And this glucose will be absorbed into the bloodstream. So your blood glucose concentration will be higher than normal. That will be probably around 140, 150 milligrams per deciliter. That would trigger the release of insulin by your beta pancreatic cells. So under these conditions, what do you think is the logical thing for insulin to do to your body? Will insulin increase or decrease glucose uptake from the bloodstream into cells such as your liver cells or your skeletal muscle cells or your adipocytes? Would insulin increase or decrease glycogen synthesis, also called glycogenesis? And this is especially important in the liver and skeletal muscle where most of your glycogen is stored. Would insulin increase or decrease glycogen breakdown, glycogenolysis? Once again, this will be predominant in the liver as well as the skeletal muscles. Would insulin increase or decrease glucose synthesis or gluconeogenesis, which mostly occurs in the liver? Would insulin increase or decrease lipids, especially triglyceride synthesis, what we often call as lipogenesis? And this will be important in the liver, where lipids are synthesized, as well as the adipocytes. Would insulin increase or decrease triglyceride breakdown, what we call lipolysis? Now, since triglycerides are stored in the adipocytes, not the liver, so this will be more important in the adipocytes. And finally, would insulin increase or decrease amino acid protein synthesis, which is predominant in your liver as well as your skeletal muscles? So what do you think insulin would do? Might be a good idea to pause the video at this stage and think about these questions. Okay, and here are the answers. Insulin would increase glucose uptake from the bloodstream. That makes sense because there's a lot of glucose in the bloodstream that's coming from the diet. So it makes sense for insulin to stimulate glucose uptake into the liver cells, glucose uptake into the muscle cells, glucose uptake into the adipocytes and the rest of the cells. Insulin will also increase glycogen synthesis. And that makes sense because we want the liver where a lot of glycogen is stored, and especially the muscles where huge amounts of glycogen is stored. We want these organs to replenish their glycogen, whatever glycogen that was used up, to make sure that they have enough glycogen stored. And that's what insulin helps to do after a meal. And it makes sense that we don't want to do glycogen breakdown. So insulin will try to decrease glycogen breakdown or glycogenolysis once again in the liver cells as well as the skeletal muscle cells. So while these tissues are making glycogen, we don't want glycogen to be broken down. So that makes sense. Now there's already a lot of glucose in the blood, and this glucose is available for everyone to use, including especially the brain, because the brain as well as red blood cells rely very heavily on glucose. So there's enough glucose in the bloodstream, so it makes sense that insulin will try to decrease synthesis of new glucose, what we call gluconeogenesis, and that happens predominantly in the liver. So insulin is going to stop the liver from making new glucose because there's already a lot of glucose in your bloodstream. Now, besides glucose, triglycerides are a very important source of energy. So it makes sense that insulin will increase triglyceride synthesis, lipogenesis, and this happens predominantly in the liver as well as your adipocytes. Remember, humans can convert excess glucose into triglycerides. We cannot do the other way around. We cannot make triglycerides into glucose, but we can make glucose into triglycerides, and that's exactly what insulin will do. It will promote triglyceride synthesis in the liver as well as the adipocytes. Now, after a meal, besides glucose, your intestine will also make chylomicrons, and these chylomicrons are rich in all kinds of lipids, and these lipids, including triglycerides, will be broken down in various tissues to give you fatty acids and glycerol, which will be absorbed by the tissues and then reconverted back into triglycerides. So there is enough triglycerides coming from the diet via the chylomicrons. So it makes sense that insulin would decrease triglyceride breakdown or lipolysis, especially in the adipocytes. Now remember, adipocytes will store triglycerides. Liver does not. The liver makes triglycerides like adipocytes, but it does not store triglycerides. It actually makes the lipids and exports the lipids as VLDL, as we saw in earlier videos. And finally, insulin promotes synthesis, so it will increase the synthesis of amino acids and proteins, and that is especially important in the liver cells as well as the skeletal muscles. So in summary, that's what insulin will do. It will cause the storage of glucose as glycogen, which is necessary for periods of starvation. So for that purpose, it will increase glucose uptake from the bloodstream. It will increase glycogen synthesis and decrease glycogen breakdown. Insulin is also an anabolic hormone, so it will promote synthesis. It will promote synthesis of fatty acids and lipids. It will promote synthesis of amino acids and proteins. However, there's one synthesis that is not promoted by insulin, and that is glucose synthesis, because there's already a lot of glucose in the bloodstream. So insulin will actually cause suppression of gluconeogenesis, especially in the liver. So to summarize, insulin increases glucose uptake by GLUT2 proteins found in the liver cell via concentration gradient. Insulin increases glycogen synthesis in the liver, decreases glycogen breakdown, decreases gluconeogenesis in the liver, increases lipid synthesis, and increases protein synthesis. For the muscle, insulin will increase glucose uptake by sending GLUT4 proteins to the plasma membrane, and later by concentration gradient. Insulin increases glycogen synthesis in a muscle, decreases glycogen breakdown, and increases protein synthesis. In the adipocytes, just like muscles, insulin increases glucose uptake by sending GLUT4 proteins to the plasma membrane. Insulin increases lipid synthesis and decreases lipid breakdown. So in the next video, we will see how insulin does all of these effects. So until the next video, thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.